Let me ask you a question before we even get started. Why are you here? Praise and worship. It's good. But why are you here? Like what brought you here today? Is it because, well, your pastor is so incredible? Because he really isn't. And he'll misspeak, and he'll stutter, he'll stumble, he'll even make mistakes, believe it or not. And he won't make the phone call he should have. Is it because the worship was so incredible? And it was. But it might change. What got you out of bed and brought you here today? Is it because you need to get fed? You should be getting fed every day. Our encouragement, our prayer for you all as a body is that we are every day seeking the face of God. And you come here on Sunday, we want to celebrate what God has been doing in your life all week long. Amen. And looking forward to what God is going to be doing in the week to come. We should not be coming here simply to get fed and go home and get starved until we get back here again on Sunday. It's not going to work. I want to encourage you and pray with you and pray for you that you are seeking God every single day. God deserves every day of our life. It's not to make you feel guilty. It's to encourage you to say, this is not the show. God's the show. We just want you to maybe get enriched, maybe get some encouragement, and then go out and experience the show all week long. What is God going to do through you tomorrow and the next day? I'm excited for that truth. Genesis 41. We are talking about Joseph. What an awesome dude Joseph was. And we shared a lot about it. So let's do a quick review because maybe you missed. It's okay. Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob. He is the great-grandson of Abraham, the patriarch of the Hebrew faith, the one that God chose to begin the nation of Israel through. He made a promise, a covenant with Abraham that he continues to follow through the lines of the kids. So Abraham to Isaac, Isaac to Jacob, and now Jacob has 12 sons. And Joseph is the 11th son. He is the first son of Jacob and Rachel, the favorite wife. He is the favorite son, and he is the least favorite brother. Hated, if you will, by his siblings. Joseph goes from being the favored in the eyes of his father to being put into a pit, planned to have murdered, and then Reuben, the oldest kid, says, hey, let's not kill him, let's just leave him there in the pit. And then planning to come back and save him later. And Judah, the fourth son, decides, well, let's just sell him, make some money off him. So imagine being in that place of Joseph. We've already imagined that last week. Well, let's keep imagining. He gets sold into slavery where he now is the bottom of a house, the captain of the guard, where he then, through work, through integrity, works his way up to be the top of the house. The Potiphar, his master, leaves him in charge of everything. Now remember, God blesses the work of his hands. It's God's work, but he uses it through Joseph. And Joseph is obedient in being a man of integrity, a man of work. Okay, so top, then through lie and deception, through the master's wife trying to coerce him into sex, he is lied about that he tried to sleep with her. Potiphar seems to believe her and throws him into prison. Top in the house, bottom in the pit, slavery. Top in that house, now he's in the bottom in prison. He works, man of integrity, continues, works his way up. This is all review, I know that. And now he's atop of this prison where the warden leaves him alone and says, hey, you're in charge. You just do what you got to do. Okay? Then these two officials, important people in the government, if you will, the cupbearer and the baker, are arrested and they're put under house arrest. And the captain of the guard, Potiphar, moves Joseph into the house to help take care of these two important people because he's worthy of being trusted. They have these dreams. These dreams make them a little concerned, a little bit weirded out. And Joseph sees their face and says, hey, what's wrong with you guys? Well, we have these dreams. And he tells them the dreams, and it interprets the dreams, and he tells the cupbearer who has the good version of the dream, hey, you're going to live. You'll be restored back into power. The baker is going to be killed. When you go back to Pharaoh, tell them about what you've seen here today. Tell him about me, because I have been sold into slavery for my place, my Hebrew people. I have now been arrested for a crime I didn't commit. And it tells us that the cupbearer forgets all about Joseph. Have you ever felt forgotten? A couple times, maybe a lot. Genesis 41. 2 years later, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing beside the Nile. When 7 healthy-looking, well-fed cows came up from the Nile and began to graze among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, sickly and thin, came up from the Nile and stood beside those cows along the bank of the Nile. The sickly, thin cows ate the healthy, well-fed cows. Okay, healthy, eaten by thin and sickly. The thin and sickly don't look any more healthy after eating the healthy ones. They still look emaciated. And Pharaoh woke up and then fell asleep again. 7 heads of grain, plump and ripe, came up on one stalk. After them, 7 heads of grain, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 plump, ripe ones. Then Pharaoh woke up, and it was only a dream. Interesting phrase there, because if you know the rest of the story, if you don't, you will pretty soon, it wasn't only a dream. And it bothers Pharaoh, and it concerns him. He thinks there's more to this than meets the eye. Like Transformers, sorry for that. And then he calls all the wise men and the magicians and the astrologers in and says, hey, here's my dream. Would you tell me what it means? And no one can interpret it. I find it interesting. We don't know if they didn't even try. They made something up, and Pharaoh knew it wasn't true, or they didn't even try. We don't know exactly what happened there. But at the end, we know that Pharaoh is not convinced, or they didn't try, and he is at a loss. No one can interpret this dream, and I know it means something. It's heavy on my heart. And the cupbearer, who forgot about Joseph, remembers him. And he begins telling Pharaoh, do you remember when you were angry with me? It was just kind of a sad thing to remind someone of. Remember when you were mad at me? And that other guy, that baker, and we were in prison 2 years ago, remember that? And we came back, and you restored me back to power, and you killed the other guy. Thanks for that, by the way, not killing me. Well, there was a Hebrew guy. And so verse 12 of 31, he continues telling Pharaoh, now a young Hebrew, a slave of the captain of the guards, was with us there. We told him our dreams. He interpreted our dreams for us, and each had its own interpretation. It turned out just the way he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged. Let's pause there. I told you last week to remember this verse, chapter 40, verse 8. It is when the cupbearer and the baker are looking really sad or forlorn or confounded. And Joseph walks in and sees them and says, hey, what's going on? And they say, we had dreams, but there is no one to interpret them. This was 2 years earlier, right? And Joseph said to them, don't interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams, okay? Don't interpretations belong to God. So here's the God part of that. And tell me your dreams. And I told you all, we're going to come back to that verse because something in there doesn't fit. Now this approach here is not from my own wisdom, whatever there is of my wisdom. We went to a conference a couple months ago, and a guy was kind of talking through the book of the whole book, the Bible, and just kind of touching on pieces. And he makes this statement about this verse and moves to the next part, and he continues on. And I said to Mike, that is hogwash. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. And so we're talking about it because he kind of did agree with it, and Katie did too. And so it's 2 against 1, and we're discussing it and debating it. And I wasn't really sold, but I could maybe kind of see where this is coming from, because the idea here is Joseph puts himself in the picture with God. But that statement seems so innocent, doesn't it? I mean, that's something we would probably say, yeah, God can do it, so I'll speak for God. That's what we do, right? It seems pretty innocent. And so I said, I didn't say that. I was thinking, I'll just look for myself. I'll pray about it. I'll go to the Word of God directly and see what is going on here, because I think it's not correct. I'm trying to edit myself here. It's poopy. Okay, so I began reading the scriptures and looking at it, and I thought, oh, maybe I was wrong. It does happen sometimes. Right, Elia? She's not, yeah, sometimes. So this is what I would tell you. And we'll get to it. Just bear with me here. Joseph is putting himself in the picture with Jesus, with God. Hey, God interprets it, but tell me. Okay, so we just read that about the cupbearer. The cupbearer heard Joseph say that. Okay? He said, God interprets dreams, but tell me your dream. The cupbearer takes it home with him. He tells Pharaoh 2 years later what took place. I'm reading to you again. Chapter 41, verse 12. I'm throwing for a loop today. I didn't know this was happening. Sorry. There we go. Now a young Hebrew, this is the word of the cupbearer, a slave of the captain of the guards, was with us there. We told him our dreams. He interpreted our dreams for us, and each had his own interpretation. It turned out just the way he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged. Who gets all the credit? Joseph. Something the cupbearer heard, he didn't get the picture that God was there. All he heard was Joseph. And he tells Pharaoh that. So what happens? Well, Pharaoh sends for Joseph, and they bring him in and make him all clean. They shave his head. And Pharaoh, verse 15, said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said about you that you can hear a dream and interpret it. You see the game telephone being played here? Joseph said, hey, I'm with God. Tell me the dream. Cupbearer hears. Joseph interprets the dream. It came true. Pharaoh hears from the cupbearer. Pharaoh now believes Joseph has the power. Potential problem here? So Pharaoh tells Joseph what he heard about him. 2 years has gone by. Something has changed in Joseph. Verse 16. Here's his response. I am not able to. Joseph answered Pharaoh. It is God who will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Different, isn't it? Where is Joseph in this picture? He's just pointing to the picture. God can do it. Not me. I don't know. We've used that word brokenness a lot in the last 3 weeks. I don't know if finally Joseph succumbed to his brokenness from his family, from his surroundings, his circumstances. He had a moment of weakness where he just thought, maybe if I just can elevate myself enough, I can get out of this prison. I want out. And so maybe if they can see what my value is, he can tell Pharaoh and they'll get me out of this place. A moment of weakness, maybe. All I can tell you is the message the people heard from Joseph first was he had the power, he had the authority. 2 years later, I don't have the power, God does. So I don't know if he got humbled, if he learned, if he realized, even hearing what Pharaoh said to him, he was broken. That is not what I was trying to say. How did I do that? And he makes it very clear, Pharaoh, I can't do that. But Pharaoh can. Have you ever been guilty of putting yourself in the picture with God? I think I have. Where I have, whether through insecurity, through pride, I don't know, you name it, I've got it. Put myself in that picture with God, and I have taken away from the picture. I haven't added to it. I've gotten God's way. What I want, what I need to do is remove myself completely from that picture and just spotlight it as much as I can and point people to it. Not by my power, but by God's. So Pharaoh, after hearing that, he tells the dream. There are these 7 cows. They look healthy. They look really well fed. They look really good. And out of the Nile come these 7 disgusting, sick-looking, emaciated cows, and they swallow these fat ones up whole, and they still look sick and hungry and emaciated. And then this stalk, it had these 7 incredible plump heads of grain on it, and then next to it comes these sick-looking, scorched, like shriveled up ones, and they just take away and they destroy the healthy ones. What does it mean? Because something's going on here and it's bothering me. And Joseph interprets, God interprets for him. He says to him, listen, God's going to tell you what he's doing. He's telling you what he's going to do. The 2 dreams are the same dream. It's the same meaning. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 plump grain are 7 healthy, incredible, abundant years of harvest you're about to have. Followed by 7 ugly, sick cows, or 7 scorched, messed up heads of grain, 7 years of famine. And it's coming, back to back. And when it comes, it will wipe this place clean. You will not have any crops to feed yourself. You're in trouble. Now, if you didn't know the famine was coming and you had 7 great years, you would just live it up. Well, we're doing really good. We'll just keep having some good time. And then year 8 comes and suddenly you're out of food. Joseph has incredible, incredible wisdom. Verse 33. So now, let Pharaoh look for a discerning and a wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this. Let him appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the harvest of the land of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. Let them gather all the excess food during these good years that are coming. Under Pharaoh's authority, store the grain in the cities so they may preserve it as food. The food will be a reserve for the land during the 7 years of famine that will take place in the land of Egypt. And the country will not be wiped out by the famine. What incredible wisdom that Joseph is presenting. What you didn't hear Joseph say was, you should hire me. You're right. I'm a pretty smart guy. You should hire me. Verse 37. The proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, listen very carefully to the language of Pharaoh. Can we find anyone like this, a man who has God's Spirit in him? So Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as intelligent and wise as you are. You will be over my house, and all my people will obey your commands. Only with regard to the throne will I be greater than you. The whole different message than the cupbearer heard from Joseph. Who gets the credit here? God. Why? Because Joseph took himself out of the picture. Listen, I know you're intelligent and I know you're wise only because you have God's Spirit in you. And because God's Spirit is in you, you're the only one for the job. So would you do that which you have said should be done? Now, Joseph isn't some nobody in terms of can't do math and he can't figure things out. He is uniquely qualified for this position. He has been in charge of his master's house, administering all kinds of things that needed to be taken care of. He managed it, took care of it. He also had been in charge of the prison, managing it, taken care of it, trusted it completely. If he had been back home, he wouldn't have had that experience. He's been uniquely qualified to do that which needs to be done. Why? Because God has a plan. His whole story, Genesis all the way through Revelation, is God's story leading us to Jesus and leading us to Jesus. And God is intending on telling the story. And through Joseph's obedience, he's telling part of it through the story of Joseph. And now Joseph is prepared in a way he never would have been had he simply succumbed to the brokenness of his family, and his surroundings, and inside of him. He also is uniquely qualified because he's had to fight against temptation. He has shown himself to be a man of integrity with a little bit. Day after day, Potiphar's wife approached him, tried to coerce him, and he ran away, even to the point of being arrested for being lied about. He has shown himself to be a man of character with a little bit. Can you imagine, as he takes his position as the second and the most powerful nation in the world at that time, what he could have done if he was corrupt? He could have made a lot of money. Because he was faithful with a little bit, he was qualified and uniquely qualified to be faithful with a whole lot. Our country, our culture, gets that upside down. For some reason, we think, well, if they were corrupt or, immoral with here, if we bring them up here, they'll get better. That makes sense, doesn't it? I don't mean any side, pick one, they all are guilty. Well, most of them are probably guilty. Because we got it messed up somehow. Well, it's okay, they were immoral here, they won't own it, they're not going to admit to it, but it happened, and so maybe up here they'll be better. It doesn't work that way. I am much more interested in finding someone who I can trust down here and here, knowing then I can trust them way up here. Joseph was such a man. Pharaoh gives Joseph a ring, marking him as being an important man. Gives him clothes to wear, a gold chain to wear around his neck. People say, a brek, they bow down to him when he walks by. They bow the knee. Verse 44, I am Pharaoh, but no one will be able to raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt without your permission. This is a Hebrew slave / prisoner, elevated up to the second most powerful position in the world at that time. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphanath-Paneah. That name in Egypt means God speaks. Even his name that Pharaoh gave him speaks of God. He gets a wife. He was 30 years old when he began this position. He has 2 sons, one named Manasseh, meaning God has made me forget all my hardship at my father's house. And the second son he named Ephraim, meaning God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. His name means God speaks. His son's name speak of God. Man, a slave, a prisoner, a man who at any point in that story could have just said, I'm done. I am tapping out. This is too much to take. I'm going to give in to my brokenness and live in it. It's going to define me. People will know me as being this. I'm going to hide in the corner of my jail cell, and I'll get some water, I'll get some bread when it comes, and just hang my head low and wait to die. But he didn't. He continues to overcome the brokenness, overcome the circumstances. And this story is not about Joseph. Not. It's about God. We have talked about before, have brokenness, right? I don't know what it is. It's different for us all, but it's there. Can God use your brokenness? The answer is yes. Certainly. Absolutely. Does your brokenness mean you're disqualified? No, it doesn't. Joseph's brokenness, his surroundings, everything he was born into or moved into, at any point in that story, can you imagine him saying, God, how can you use this? God, how can you use this? I'm nothing. I'm nobody. I was a favorite of my dad. Now I'm nothing. I'm forgotten. I heard my siblings fighting over me, like how much to sell me for, planning to try to kill me. I begged them to let me go, and they wouldn't do it. I don't know that I could have come out the same way Joseph did. I don't know that I have come out the same way Joseph did in my brokenness. And even still, God can use my story. Here are some words that I don't hear describing Joseph. Vengeance. He could, if he was holding a grudge against his brothers. We'll get to that next week a little bit, maybe. Pity. I don't pity Joseph. Maybe I should, I don't know. But reading his story, reading what's happening, I don't pity it. I'm amazed by it. Resentment. Not a word that I would use to describe Joseph. Victim. I would not use the word victim to describe Joseph. But here's the truth. I would use all those words to describe me. Not proud of it. And more. My story isn't worse than Joseph's. And so I look at Joseph as a man who is not perfect. We saw he's not perfect. But through it all, he pursued God. And he allowed God to use all that he had gone through to tell God's story. And what a story it is. His circumstances uniquely prepared him for a position when he would be used to save Egypt. I mean, Egypt is saved because of this. The nations outside of Egypt are saved because of it. And the little place in Canaan where his dad and his brothers and his nieces and nephews are living, to find out next week, are saved because of Joseph's obedience and how God uses that story to bring God's people into safety. All working towards Jesus. I told you before, if you're going to pick any brother out among all the 12, who would you pick to be Jesus' great-great-great-great-great-grandfather? You would pick Joseph, wouldn't you? God didn't. He didn't use it. He uses Judah, the guy who sells Joseph. He uses his line. Lion of Judah. Sing a song on that today. What we find value in, what we see as being what should be told is not the story that God is telling. We have to get ourselves out of the picture and let God shine. Let God tell his story through us so he can be glorified, so he can be known, not so my story can be told. My story is only as good as the God working through it, even in the brokenness. We sing, closing this song, I want to remind you that Joseph did not define himself by his circumstances, by how he was treated, by what happened to him or what happened in him. Joseph is defined by God. Joseph was who God wanted him to be. Wasn't perfect, okay? But he continued to pursue God. I don't know your stories, but God does. Have you ever asked the question, God, what can I learn in this to be better used by you later? As you look back at your life, and there are certainly bumps, maybe valleys that are so low you can't see the bottom, somewhere along there. Maybe you are in the valley right now. Can you see God's hand? Not saying he puts you there, but he's with you in it. You are uniquely qualified for where you are right now. God can use you in ways that he can never use me where you are right now. Stop wanting my story or Joseph's story and own your own. And say, God, would you just tell yours through mine so you can be glorified and you can be seen? Pharaoh, the king of the most powerful nation in the world at that time, recognizes God because Joseph got out of the picture. He names him. God speaks. He recognizes God's Spirit lives within you. Would you take this thing and run with it? Because no one is wise and intelligent as a person whose God's Spirit dwells within.